Enough talk. Let's see if your symbols are as strong as you believe. General Rysko Volnar spat, his voice like ice. His fingers, adorned with the insignia of the Chal Empire, gripped the Earth flag with an air of finality. The tension in the council chamber thickened, palpable in the stagnant atmosphere. The ambassadors of every species, alarmed, uneasy, yet in awe, watched him with bated breath. The once impregnable Chal Empire had made its move. This was not just any diplomatic gathering. It was a final show of strength, a declaration of dominance. General Volnar, with his signature coldness and unyielding belief in the superiority of the Chal, had long held contempt for humanity. Earth, to him, was a mere echo of a long-dead civilization, insignificant and irrelevant. The flag, freshly presented by Earth's representatives that morning, fluttered in his grasp, a symbol of human pride, but to Volnar it was nothing more than a piece of fabric, ripe for humiliation. "This is what your pride amounts to," Volnar muttered under his breath, before stepping toward the central podium. The council chamber fell still, as the hushed whispers grew louder, eyes fixed upon him in uneasy anticipation. "I will not waste another word on this relic of your weakness," he continued, the defiant smirk never leaving his lips. The eyes of the Earth representatives, who had long played the game of diplomacy, now bore the brunt of his gaze. Marnik wrote, Earth's seasoned strategist, clenched his fists, the only outward sign of his mounting fury. With a precise flick of his wrist, Volnar held the flag over the podium and set it aflame with a swift motion, the flames licking at the fabric like a cruel mockery of Earth's pride. The symbol of human strength, a banner that had been carried through decades of struggle, was reduced to a smoldering heap before the eyes of the galaxy. The sharp crackle of the burning fabric filled the room, followed by a chilling silence. The heat from the flames was sharp, searing the air, making the space between each breath seem longer than it was. The smell of burning fibers rose up, an acidic reminder of Volnar's ruthless conquest. "Your efforts will not change your fate," Volnar's voice cut through the silence, as he stared down at the remnants of the flag. "Earth was always beneath us." The Earth delegates stood in frozen shock, their collective indignation boiling beneath the surface. Marnik wrote, the leader of Earth's diplomatic efforts, stood unwavering. His expression, though calm, betrayed nothing of the fury that raged inside him. "That was a mistake, General." Marnik's voice broke the silence, low and deliberate, but filled with a deep certainty. "You have no idea what you've just set in motion." Volnar's eyes flashed with disdain. He wasn't concerned. Earth had no real power, not compared to the mighty Chal Empire. He turned from Marnik and addressed the rest of the council. "Let this be a lesson to all. Earth is a shadow of a past that no longer has a place in this galaxy." The room was unnervingly quiet as Volnar's final words echoed off the cold stone walls. The faint crackle of the dying flames lingered, but not a word from the other representative. For a brief moment, it seemed as if all eyes were on Earth's representatives, who stood at the center of this humiliation. "What Volnar doesn't know is that we've been preparing for this very moment," Marnik muttered under his breath, barely loud enough for his own delegation to hear. His mind raced with plans long laid in motion, strategies etched in secret. The Chal Empire's belief in their invincibility was well established, but Marnik knew what was coming next. The Vesper Protocol was already set into motion, the sophisticated systems long in place, and nearly impossible for Volnar to even begin to comprehend. But Volnar would soon learn. Volnar had made his choice. He believed Earth had no teeth, but now his arrogance had crossed a line. The devastation would come swiftly, and it would be total. Earth had already begun its response. "Your empire will burn in ways you cannot fathom," Marnik said under his breath, his voice steady but tinged with growing resolve. As Volnar turned away, the room seemed to shrink. The galaxy would soon know that Earth was far more than the fragile relic Volnar had seen it as. Humanity had been underestimated, and Volnar had just sealed his planet's fate. The chamber fell back into uneasy quiet, but the wheels of revenge had already started turning. Marnik Roth sat at the edge of the war room, his fingers gliding over the cold metal surface of the console, his eyes fixed on the fluctuating data displayed on the heads-up display before him. Never wavered. The information was critical. Earth's response to General Volnar's brazen act of defiance had already been set into motion, and now it was time to see it through. A slight shift in his posture, a breath drawn, and then a cold order to the waiting officers. "Activate the protocol." The words were precise, spoken with a calmness that belied the urgency of the situation. A few seconds passed before the soft clicking sound of keys being pressed echoed through the room. The operation was underway, the carefully crafted Vesper protocol, the culmination of years of secrecy and meticulous planning, was now in full motion. As Marnik's hand hovered above the console, the first pulse rippled through the hidden systems embedded throughout Earth's distant colonies. No one would hear the hum of an engine. No alarms would blare. The protocol was not an attack in the conventional sense. Instead, it was a quiet, calculated response, a method of stripping away the strength of an enemy without ever laying a single hand on them. On Earth's military satellites, far beyond the reach of Chal Prime, advanced gravitational pulse weapons began to activate. The weapon's power was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it would set into motion a chain of events that would unfold with terrifying consequence. Gravitational shifts would soon tear at the core of Chal Prime itself, and Volnar would never see it coming. In the heart of Chal Prime, the planet's immense infrastructure buzzed with oblivious efficiency. The Chal had never feared Earth, too small, too fractured, too weak. As far as they were concerned, this was just another diplomatic gesture to laugh off. But unbeknownst to them, each tick of the clock was a countdown to their undoing. Marnik shifted his attention to a secondary screen, where the encrypted communication lines were blinking. Confirmations came in slowly. The first ripples had already begun. A slight tremor, barely noticeable, jostled the outer sectors of Chal Prime. At first it would be dismissed as a natural occurrence. That was exactly what Earth intended. But no one was prepared for what followed. A soft vibration, no more than a whisper through the fabric of space-time, reached across the expanse. It began as a minuscule alteration in gravity, a shift in the orbital pattern of Chal Prime, but it spread, gradually at first, like a virus. The response was not immediate. Earth had always believed in patience. Every part of the plan, every variable, was set into motion in such a way that it would take hours before the Chal Empire could even begin to understand what was happening. Marnik leaned back, his eyes scanning the display as he tracked the early signs. He could feel the weight of each passing moment. There would be no speeches, no grand announcements. The protocol was not about loud victories or bombastic gestures. It was about precision, about stripping away the very foundation of the Chal's strength, until they were left grasping at the void. The first major shake hit the southern hemisphere of Chal Prime. Entire sectors began to crumble, as if the ground itself had grown unstable. Buildings twisted and collapsed into themselves, the seams of the planet's tectonic structure cracking open. Communications within the planet flickered as energy grids began to fail. The Chal, still unaware of the cause, scrambled to restore order, but it was too late. On Earth in the war room, Marnik stood motionless, observing the progress with an unwavering focus. The system he had spent years designing, the intricate network that linked Earth's scattered colonies and resources, was now working in tandem to bring down the Chal Empire, not with brute force, but with the cold inevitability of calculated retribution. His mind was already racing forward, anticipating what would happen next. Volnar had made a mistake, underestimating the tenacity of a species that had once been dismissed. Humanity had never been a creature of confrontation. It was always in the shadows, waiting, watching. Now, the storm had come. "Have we received any reaction from Chal Prime?" Marnik asked, his voice steady. One of the officers glanced up, eyes wide with a hint of disbelief. "They have no idea what's happening. Communications are failing across the board. Sectors are breaking apart at an accelerating rate. We're getting reports from our deep space stations. They're feeling the pressure too. It's spreading." Marnik nodded. The first ripple of the gravitational pulse had barely been felt, but it was already enough. The damage was done. The Chal were fighting a war they didn't even know they were in, and they would pay the price for their arrogance. Back on Chal Prime, the initial chaos began to escalate. What started as minor tremors turned into violent rifts in the ground, splitting cities in two. The planet's core had already begun to destabilize, and the fissures widened. Volnar, as he stood atop the Chal command center, had no idea that the forces pulling at his planet were not natural. He thought it was an attack, perhaps even a retaliation. But by whom? From Earth? A backwater system to the Chal had no resources to launch such an attack, and yet the ground beneath him was breaking apart. In his mind, the pieces began to shift. He turned to his officers, his voice demanding answers, but none came. The Chal Empire's flawless systems, its vast network of power, military dominance, and control, was slowly being torn apart. Yet still, Volnar refused to believe Earth had orchestrated this silent assault. He couldn't. On Earth, the officials in the war room exchanged knowing glances. The first phase of the protocol had worked perfectly. The gravitational pulses were now escalating, subtly breaking down the key components of Chal Prime's infrastructure. The Empire's vast military apparatus was rendered useless. The highly advanced warships that had once glided effortlessly through space were now fighting to remain in orbit, helpless against the subtle, unseen force wreaking havoc on their home planet. Marnik Rote stood still, his face a mask of quiet resolve. "It's begun," he said to the room, his voice firm. "Let them come to terms with what they've unleashed." "Report, General Risco." Volnar's voice cut through the chaos, his tone fraying at the edges. His fingers curled tightly around the edge of his command chair, the sensation of the metal digging into his skin grounding him, though his thoughts spun wildly. The tremors that had rocked Chal Prime moments ago were no longer just a nuisance. They were beginning to spread. The ground beneath him shuddered again, this time harder, with a spine-rattling intensity that rattled his bones. His eyes flicked to the laser plasma display before him, where data streamed in frantically. Nothing made sense. The planet's surface was fracturing, and yet no conventional system seemed to be failing. He hit a button on his console, summoning more reports. The truth was inescapable now. "General, the southern sectors are experiencing severe tremors. The eastern energy grid has failed entirely. We're losing power in multiple zones. It's spreading," an officer shouted over the roar of alarms. The flickering red lights cast long, violent shadows across the darkened command center. Volnar's eyes narrowed, and his throat tightened. This was no ordinary disruption. This was something different, something deliberate. The Chal Empire, invincible for centuries, was now being tested in ways it had never anticipated. As the reports continued to flood in, the reality of the situation hit him. His empire was beginning to crumble. "What's the cause of this?" Volnar barked, his voice sharp. "It can't be natural. The planet's gravitational stability is being compromised. Check the core immediately." His officers scrambled to input commands, their fingers tapping against consoles with urgent precision. But deep inside, Volnar's mind raced ahead of the situation. Earth had been the only one to challenge him directly. Could it be them? Had they set this into motion? Impossible. Earth was nothing more than a relic. And yet, the timing was too precise. The gravitational shifts weren't just random. They were methodical, engineered. Another violent jolt shook the room. This time, Volnar's chair tipped to the side as the force reverberated through the building. The ground outside, once stable, cracked open and massive fissures began to carve into the planet's surface. In an instant, entire buildings collapsed in on themselves, their once proud facades crumbling to dust. He stood abruptly, the chair screeching across the floor as it rolled out of his way. "Activate containment. Lock down the facilities. Get a hold of the situation." His command fell on deaf ears as his officers scrambled for control. None of them had ever witnessed anything like this. Volnar's pulse quickened as the data continued to pour in. But no solutions came, no easy answers. What should have been routine control protocols faltered and failed. The systems meant to maintain order, power, and stability collapsed faster than Volnar could process. Chal Prime, the jewel of the Empire, was dying, right before his eyes. The display in front of him now showed a darkened map, the red zones expanding across Chal Prime like the spread of an illness, devouring the planet's heart. And it wasn't slowing down. It was accelerating. "We need to reroute all emergency power to the central hub," Volnar ordered, but his voice was lost amidst the noise. He stormed across the command deck, his boots pounding the floor in a rhythm of rising panic. A planet of this scale, this advanced, couldn't be taken down this easily, not by anything they had seen before. And yet, the evidence was overwhelming. "It's the gravitational pulses," one of his officers said, barely audible over the static noise in the room. His face was pale, his words shaking with disbelief. "Something from outside our system is disrupting the core." Volnar whipped around to face him. "Explain." "General, I believe the Earth weaponized the destabilizing effect of their gravity generators. They've weaponized the planet's own gravitational field." The officer stammered. "It's like a targeted pulse that's bypassing our system." Volnar's fist slammed down onto the console beside him, his rage a cold fury. "Impossible. Earth cannot possibly wield such power." Yet the truth stood before him. Volnar's mind swirled with a mixture of disbelief and fury. Earth had taken the subtle approach. No missiles, no bombs, just a methodical, surgical destruction. Outside, a blast of light brightened the darkened sky. A Chal warship that had once sailed with ease through the stars now spiraled out of control, its systems failing as gravitational distortions ripped its hull apart. One by one, the ships that had once patrolled the void around Chal Prime were falling into chaos, losing their formations, becoming helpless debris in space. The cold air of the command center felt thick as the ship lurched again. Another violent ripple, deeper this time, broke through the planet's crust, a massive chasm splitting wide open in the north. A skyscraper-sized slab of rock tore free, crumbling into the abyss. The seismic shock echoed through the walls, each tremor setting loose an avalanche of destruction. One sector after another was swallowed whole by the deep fractures now growing at an exponential rate. Volnar's chest tightened. The pride of the Chal Empire, its cities, its power, was disappearing in front of him. The people who had followed him, who had believed in the strength of his rule, were now scattering, helpless in the face of an enemy they had never even recognized. The Chal Empire, whose power had once been unquestionable, was crumbling. "We're losing control, General," the officer at the central console called out, his voice barely audible through the chaos. "We need to evacuate now. The surface is collapsing." "Evacuate," Volnar snapped, spinning toward him. "Where do you expect them to go? The planet is coming apart. We'll have no escape. We'll fight until the end." But as he shouted the words, he realized the truth in them. There was no more fight left. The end had already begun. His once mighty empire, proud and untouchable, was being crushed under the weight of its own arrogance. Volnar's fists clenched as he stared at the planet's deepening wounds. He felt the pulse of power drain away with each passing second. The Chal Empire had no way to respond to what Earth had unleashed. No way to reverse the damage. They were already gone. The crushing realization hit Volnar like a wave, knocking the air from his lungs. The collapse of Chal Prime was inevitable, and it was all because of his decision to burn Earth's flag. His empire was gone. Damn it. What's happening now? General Volnar's fist slammed into the command console, sending a shockwave through his hand. But it didn't provide the release he needed. The screen before him flickered violently, its edges warping under the stress of the crumbling planet. Data poured in, faster now, confirming what Volnar had already feared. His empire was dying, its organs shutting down one by one. The relentless tremors tearing apart Chal Prime had only grown stronger. Whole cities were sinking into the fractures. The core was unstable, as if the very heart of the planet itself had been hollowed out. This wasn't an attack. This was something far worse. He gritted his teeth and glanced around the command room. But there was no escape from the chaos. His officers were moving in a blur of frantic activity, but the panic on their faces said more than the words that were coming out of their mouths. Nothing worked. The stabilizers failed. The defenses were useless. The Chal, who had stood above all others, were now looking to him for answers, and all he could offer was a clenched fist. "General, we've lost communication with the Eastern Fleet. Systems are offline. The gravitational anomaly is spreading. There's no way to contain it," one of his officers stammered, unable to hide the tremble in his voice. Volnar's mind raced. Earth. It had to be Earth. No other enemy had this kind of precision, this subtlety. But how had they done this without anyone noticing? The Chal Empire's superiority in every field was supposed to be unassailable. He had burned their flag without fear, confident in his invincibility. And now, his empire, the very empire he had fought and bled for, was on the verge of annihilation. He took a slow breath, trying to center himself, but the failure of his empire, once so proud and dominant, gnawed at his core. His mind reeled as he thought back on his arrogance, the reckless disregard he'd shown to the humans. They were nothing more than an inconvenience, or so he had thought. "Sir, we're losing the western sectors. There's no telling how far this will spread," another officer reported, their voice faltering. Volnar turned slowly, his gaze scanning the room. It was as if the entire command center had slipped into a nightmare. Systems short-circuiting, power grids failing, and the very foundations of his world crumbling. He could feel the room closing in on him, the air heavy with the realization that this was the end. His empire was collapsing. He couldn't allow it. He would not let his legacy, his people, be wiped out like this. Volnar's hands tightened into fists, the sharp pain of his nails digging into his palms grounding him for a moment. He needed control. He needed to restore order. Find the source. Now, he commanded, his voice rising with frustration. The response came too slowly, too weakly. General, the gravitational anomalies, they're coming from deep within the planet. It's like the core itself is being manipulated. He didn't want to hear it. The core. Impossible. It wasn't something any enemy could manipulate. It had to be a malfunction. A failure of the planet's own systems. Yet, as he stood there, the realization struck him like a physical blow. It wasn't a failure. It was Earth's doing. They've weaponized gravity, he muttered, eyes wide with disbelief. How did they? He was cut off by another violent tremor. The command center buckled under the force. This time, the shaking didn't stop. The lights blinked out, and the heads-up displays flickered erratically, showing brief glimpses of destruction. Buildings collapsing, entire districts being swallowed up by cracks in the ground. The once proud planet was falling apart. Sir, we can't stop it, one of his engineers shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Volnar's heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the chaos unfolding before him. He had dismissed Earth as a threat. He had underestimated them, and now, his hubris had led to the destruction of his people. Chal Prime was disintegrating, and there was no force in the universe that could reverse it. General, the military forces are in disarray, another officer reported, barely able to keep his voice steady. Ships are drifting. We can't maintain command. Our fleet is falling apart. Volnar turned sharply toward the officer. What do you mean falling apart? The gravitational shifts are tearing at their structures. The fleets, they're lost. We're losing control of everything. The cold realization sunk in deeper. Chal Prime, the heart of the Empire, was being torn to pieces, and it was all because of the mistake he had made. He had dismissed Earth, burned their flag in front of the galaxy's most powerful beings, and now the Chal were paying the price for it. He had always believed that strength came from domination, that control was power. But in this moment, as his planet cracked apart around him, Volnar understood the brutal truth. The strength of a people lies in their ability to endure and adapt. Earth had adapted while the Chal Empire, in its arrogance, had forgotten how to bend, and now, the weight of that mistake was unbearable. Another violent shock sent him sprawling to the ground. His fists slammed against the cold metal floor as he tried to catch his breath. His body was racked with panic, but in the back of his mind there was a sharp clarity. He had been wrong. The Empire's strength was nothing if it couldn't withstand the consequences of its own arrogance. Is there any hope? Volnar whispered, his voice hoarse with the weight of realization. A senior officer, one of the few still standing, walked toward him slowly. General, there is nothing we can do. We have underestimated Earth. The words landed like a final blow. Volnar closed his eyes, the weight of defeat crushing him. It had taken one mistake, one careless act of arrogance, and now, his empire was lost. There would be no restoration, no redemption, and as the ground shook again, he knew there was no turning back. Get me a status update. General Volnar's voice rang out, raw with panic. His hand trembled as it gripped the cold edge of his command console, but the screen before him displayed only a fractured reality. His empire crumbling at an impossible pace. Chal Prime was tearing itself apart, and there was no way to reverse it. The ground beneath his feet groaned and creaked as another seismic wave surged through the planet. This one was the worst yet, a violent rupture that sent entire sections of the capital city crumbling into the depths of the earth. The walls shook, the floor buckled, and a deep rumble seemed to reverberate through his very bones. The laser plasma displays flickered erratically, a stark reminder that the systems Volnar had once trusted were no longer reliable. General, an officer shouted, barely audible over the chaos. We've lost full communication with the fleet. There's nothing left. We can't stop the core from destabilizing. We're out of time. Volnar's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced to find a solution, but there was none. He had always prided himself on his tactical genius, on his ability to control every aspect of the Empire. But now, he was reduced to watching helplessly as everything he had built, everything he had fought for, unraveled before his eyes. How long do we have? Volnar demanded, the words escaping him like a plea. Minutes, maybe seconds, the officer replied, the defeat in his voice unmistakable. He clenched his fists, feeling the pressure of impending doom sink into his skin. The empire that had ruled the galaxy with an iron grip was crumbling, and there was no one left to save it. His mind flashed back to the moment he had burned Earth's flag. His arrogant dismissal of humanity's strength. Their potential had led them here. He had assumed Earth was weak. He had assumed Earth could never challenge and now, the consequences of his pride were laid out in front of him. An empire reduced to rubble, a civilization teetering on the edge of collapse. "General, look," one of the officers pointed to a screen that showed a live feed of the Chal fleet, the heart of their military might disintegrating in space. The warships, once proud and invincible, were now aimless, powerless. The gravitational pulses had distorted their trajectories, sending them spiraling out of control. Chal ships collided with each other in chaotic spirals, their once advanced shields failing to protect them from the very forces Volnar had dismissed as insignificant. Volnar stood, rooted in place, his eyes locked on the screen. A quiet dread crawled through him, sinking deep into his chest. The fleet, the symbol of his might, was falling apart. The pride of Chal Prime was lost in the gravitational storm he had brought upon them. His eyes stung, and for the first time in years he felt something unfamiliar: fear. "We're done. The fleet's gone. The planet's gone." Where another officer's voice trembled as the console in front of him exploded, throwing him backward across the room. The heat of the explosion lingered in the air, sharp and choking. Volnar's stomach churned. He turned from the screen, his mind refusing to believe what was happening. The Chal Empire, so powerful and feared, was being reduced to nothing. His empire, his legacy, was crumbling in front of him. The weight of failure pressed down on his chest. There was no escape. His people were already scattering, seeking refuge in the chaos. But there was nowhere to go. There was no safety from the inevitable collapse. Volnar had no place left to hide and no plan to stop it. He had unleashed Earth's vengeance, and now he was paying the price. In the midst of the destruction, Volnar heard a voice that cut through the noise of crumbling metal and burning cities. "General, we need to leave now." "The transport ships are ready," an officer said, her voice strained with urgency. Volnar turned to face her, his eyes hollow. He felt like a ghost, wandering through his own death. Escape, it was the only thing left to him. "Escape?" he asked, his voice brittle with disbelief. "Where would I go? This is my fault. I've condemned my people to death, and now you want me to run?" Her face softened, but only for a moment. "Sir, there's nothing left for us here. Chal Prime is lost. It's time to save what we can." Volnar swallowed hard, his throat tight with unshed rage and sorrow. He had always believed himself to be invincible, but now, he realized too late, that even the mightiest empires crumble, even the strongest leaders fall. He had underestimated Earth, and now the galaxy would know the cost of that mistake. His gaze fell on the flickering plasma display, where the planet's final moments were unfolding before him. The gravitational shifts were tearing through the very heart of Chal Prime. Buildings, military complexes, and research labs that had once stood as monuments to Chal's power were being swallowed by the planet's ruptured surface. His fingers twitched at his sides, the weight of his failure crushing him. He wanted to scream, to rage against the inevitable, but the words died in his throat. The empire that he had fought to build, the empire he had burned so many bridges to create, was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do. "Prepare for evacuation," Volnar said, his voice a hollow echo of its former strength. "We leave Chal Prime, now." But even as the order left his lips, he knew it was already too late. The evacuation would be a futile attempt to escape the inevitable collapse of everything he had ever known. His legacy was gone, and nothing, no one could stop it. As he walked toward the escaped transport, Volnar glanced once more at the decaying planet on the plasma display. Chal Prime, the center of his empire, was reduced to nothing more than a broken shell, caught in the grip of an unstoppable force. Earth had won, not with weapons, not with warships, but with patience. They had made the Chal Empire fall without ever firing a single shot, and Volnar, the great and powerful leader, was left to watch it all fade to black. The planet lay in ruins, an empire's heart reduced to nothing more than fractured dust. The chaos had subsided, and in its wake, an eerie stillness had taken over. Marnik Rot stood on the observation deck of the Earth command ship, staring out at the stars. The debris of Chal Prime, now just a scattering of shattered rocks and burning remnants, floated like a bitter reminder of what had transpired. The silence of victory was not sweet. It was a heavy, suffocating quiet, as if the galaxy itself had exhaled a final exhausted breath. He leaned against the railing, the cool air of space brushing his face through the viewport. The stars shimmered as they always had, but to Marnik they seemed dimmer now, as if the light had faded just a little. Chal Prime had once stood as a beacon of power in the galaxy, a symbol of the Chal Empire's unyielding dominance. And now, that light had been extinguished. The once unimaginable had been achieved. The mighty empire had crumbled, not by force but by the quiet, insidious reach of human ingenuity. Behind him, the sound of footsteps echoed softly on the metal floors. He turned to see Commander Raul Oslar entering the room, his expression weary but resolute. "How long until the final reports are in?" Marnik asked, his voice low but steady, the weight of the moment sinking deep into his bones. "Another hour," Raul replied, his voice betraying the exhaustion that had set in. "The final data is still coming in, but it's clear the Chal leadership is in disarray. There's no unified response. They're broken." Marnik nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. The Chal leadership had fractured in the chaos, their once powerful command structure now an echo of what it had been. Valner's last attempt to maintain control had been pathetic, his empire crumbling before his very eyes, just as Marnik had predicted. But even now, there was no joy in his victory. The cost of what had been done weighed on him. The soft hiss of the doors sliding open interrupted his thoughts. Marnik turned to find Meshach Dorn, the head of Earth's diplomatic council, stepping into the room. His face was calm, but there was a certain sadness in his eyes that Marnik had come to recognize all too well. "Is it over?" Meshach asked, though he already knew the answer. Marnik turned his gaze back to the stars. "Yes," he said softly, "but it's not the victory we hoped for." Meshach stepped beside him, following his gaze into the void of space. "No, but it's the victory we needed. The galaxy will remember this. The balance of power has shifted." Marnik let out a breath, his shoulders slumping as the weight of everything that had transpired hit him all at once. "We didn't just destroy Chal Prime. We dismantled an empire without firing a single shot. And yet, the cost of that power, of that restraint, is not something I can easily reconcile." The stillness stretched between them. Neither spoke for a long moment, as both men reflected on the far-reaching implications of what had happened. Marnik had orchestrated the Vesper Protocol, a plan that had, in its quiet precision, torn the heart out of the Chal Empire. But now, as the galaxy waited to see how this would reshape the political landscape, Marnik found himself questioning the nature of that victory. "We've shattered their pride, their arrogance," Meshach said eventually. "But what have we become in the process? How do we rebuild after this?" Marnik turned to face him. "I don't know," he admitted. "What's left to rebuild after something like this?" Meshach's expression softened. "There's nothing left of their empire. The Chal leadership is scattered. Their fleets are in disarray. The galaxy is watching us. We need to show them who we are now." Marnik's gaze turned inward as he processed the words. They were right. The Vesper Protocol had been Earth's quiet retribution, a response that had taken down the Chal without violence, without bloodshed. But now, with the Chal Empire reduced to ashes, Earth had to rebuild, not just its own power, but its place in the galaxy. The silence of their victory would become a symbol of their dominance, but it would also be a reminder of the price of restraint. "Send a message to the Council," Marnik said, his voice growing firmer. "Let them know that Earth is not to be underestimated. We will not take up the mantle of the Chal Empire, but we will lead with quiet strength. Our actions speak louder than any warship ever could." Raul Oslar nodded. "It's done. We've begun rebuilding our position in the galactic hierarchy. Earth's influence will be restored, but it will take time." Marnik turned from the viewport and began pacing slowly, his mind shifting to the next phase. "I know it will take time, but we need to act swiftly. The galaxy won't sit idly by as the balance shifts. The Chal may be gone, but there are others waiting in the wings. We must be ready." As he spoke, the weight of their next steps loomed large. This was just the beginning of something new, something that had to be handled with careful hand. Earth would no longer be the underdog. Their quiet vengeance had made them a force to be reckoned with. But as the galaxy looked to them, Marnik knew that the true test of Earth's strength had only just begun. The victory had been secured, but the rebuilding of a new era was not a task to be taken lightly. The room fell quiet again, this time with a sense of closure, as the weight of history pressed down on Earth's leader. In the cold silence that followed, Marnik Rot looked out once more at the stars, the endless stretch of space before him, knowing that Earth's place in it had forever been altered. "Prepare the announcement." Marnik Rot's voice rang through the control room, firm but laced with an undeniable undercurrent of resolve. His hands, once tightly clasped in thought, now moved across the console with swift precision. His mind was working fast, organizing the final stages of Earth's political restructuring. It had been days since the fall of Chal Prime, but the galaxy still buzzed with the aftershocks of that monumental shift. The Chal Empire, once the epitome of power and fear, had been erased quietly, efficiently, and thoroughly, without a single shot fired. Now Earth stood at the precipice of something much greater. The old order was dead, a new one was rising, and the galaxy would soon understand the full extent of Earth's newfound strength. Marnik stared at the heads-up display in front of him, where the remaining factions of the galaxy were beginning to reorganize, recalibrate, and most importantly, reevaluate their position. The Chal had long been the center of galactic politics, but now there was a vacuum, and that void would be filled by Earth. Marnik's breath was steady as he surveyed the systems in place for their next steps. He could feel the gravity of the moment, the weight of everything that had transpired, and the realization of just how far Earth had come. General Rot, Commander Ral Oslar's voice broke through Marnik's thoughts, bringing him back to the present. The message is ready to be transmitted to the Council. Marnik nodded and stood, walking slowly to the edge of the observation deck. His eyes swept across the stars, but for the first time they felt closer. The vastness of space no longer seemed like an unreachable expanse. Earth had already taken its first steps toward its rightful place in the galaxy, and the path forward was clear. We'll show them that power isn't just in the hands of those who command fleets or weapons. Marnik said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. The galaxy will know that our strength lies in our ability to endure. Our power is in patience. Ral approached him, and their eyes met for a brief moment. The Chal are gone, General, but there will be others who will test us. Let them, Marnik responded, his gaze unwavering. The Chal thought their superiority was absolute, and now their ashes will remind the galaxy that no empire is invincible, not even one as mighty as theirs. A pause followed, heavy with the weight of those words. They knew the implication. Earth's quiet dominance, its ability to rise from the ashes of its former weakness, was not just a lesson in military might. It was a statement to the galaxy that Earth would no longer be a footnote in galactic history, no longer The laser plasma displays flickered in front of them, casting a soft glow that reflected off the polished surfaces of the room. Marnik watched as the transmission went live, the image of Earth's flag now proudly displayed in the center, replacing the burning remnants of the Chal Empire. This was no longer just about survival. This was Earth's moment of rebirth. The flag had become the symbol of not only Earth's resilience, but also its quiet strength. It was a symbol of Earth's ascension to the center stage of galactic politics. We have the attention of the galaxy, Marnik said, his voice steady. Now we ensure they know what comes next. As he spoke, reports began to flood in, each one detailing the immediate responses from various galactic factions. Some hesitated, unsure of how to react to the sudden shift in power. Others had already begun extending their hands in tentative alliances. The Chal's grip on the galaxy had been shattered, and in its place Earth's influence was now growing. But Marnik knew the real challenge lay ahead. It wasn't just about filling the power vacuum left behind. It was about ensuring Earth's position was unshakable. The galaxy would have to adapt to a new order, and Earth would be the force that shaped it. Ral moved to Marnik's side, holding a report in his hand. The outer systems are already sending Earth's leadership is becoming a focal point for negotiations. Marnik turned toward him, his face resolute. Let them come. We will listen, but we will never beg. Earth will lead, not follow. There was a sharp, determined edge to his voice that carried the weight of everything Earth had endured, and now everything it was about to become. He knew that their strength would no longer be questioned, and that those who had once looked down upon Earth would now look up in fear, in respect, or perhaps in begrudging recognition. The room fell quiet as the transmission to the galaxy's leadership reached its peak. The message was simple, but it carried the full force of Earth's resolve. We stand as the new power in this galaxy. We will no longer be dismissed or ignored. Our future is our own to shape. Those who seek alliance will be welcomed. Those who seek conflict will face the consequences of underestimating humanity. The words were not just an announcement. They were a declaration of intent. And the galaxy, now unsettled by the sudden shift, would soon realize the true meaning of that declaration. Earth was no longer an outsider, no longer a species to be overlooked. They had learned the cost of patience, and now they would claim their place in the star. We are ready, Marnik said, as the last of the transmission went out. Ral nodded. "The galaxy will change, General. It's only a matter of time." Marnik looked out toward the stars once more, the weight of Earth's new destiny settling over him. The time of waiting was over. The galaxy had witnessed Earth's strength, and now the true work began. The influence of the Chal Empire was nothing but a memory, fading into the past. A new order had been born, and Earth would lead it, guiding the galaxy with the steady, patient hand of power earned, not through violence, but through wisdom. As Marnik turned away from the observation deck, the quiet strength of Earth's victory reverberated through him. He had no illusions about the challenges ahead, but for the first time he felt certain about the path Earth would take. "You want a story?" Marnik Rote's voice echoed through the briefing room, his gaze fixed on the young diplomat standing before him. "I'll give you one." The room fell still, the gravity of his words pressing in as Marnik's voice resonated with the weight of history. The Galactic Council had gathered once again, but this time it was different. This time Earth was not just a player in the game, it was the game itself. After the fall of the Chal Empire, after the execution of the Vesper Protocol, Earth's actions had become the stuff of legend. Marnik's eyes swept across the room. The delegates now standing in the shadow of Earth's undeniable power waited for him to continue. This wasn't about diplomacy anymore. This was a reminder, a statement, and Marnik was the messenger. "The story of Earth's rise is told in whispers across the galaxy," he continued. "It's a story of patience, of quiet strength, and of the consequences of underestimating humanity. Earth didn't seek this. Earth didn't demand the spotlight, but we were forced to take our place at the table, whether the galaxy was ready or not." He paused, his fingers brushing the edge of the heads-up display in front of him. The screen flickered briefly, and a map of the galaxy appeared, with Chal Prime marked as a distant memory, a faded scar on the galaxy's past. And surrounding it, Earth, now at the center of everything. The words Marnik spoke were no longer mere facts. They were lessons etched into the very fabric of the galaxy's future. The Chal Empire, once mighty and unchallenged, had been dismantled without a single shot fired. The Vesper Protocol, a quiet act of vengeance, had shifted the power balance irrevocably. Now the galaxy looked to Earth, not with suspicion, but with a sense of awe. "It wasn't the way the Chal thought it would end," Marnik said softly, his eyes narrowing as the memory of the fall still burned in his mind. "No, it wasn't the grand battles, the endless waves of warships. It was something much simpler. An old world's pride burned and scattered in the wind, and it was that pride that brought them down." As he spoke, the room behind him darkened. The screen displayed a new image. Earth's flag unfurled, its colors bold and vibrant against the backdrop of the galaxy. It wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was a reminder, a warning to every species that had once looked down upon Earth. The flag, now more than a symbol of humanity's survival, had become a beacon of its power. "The Vesper Protocol," Marnik continued, his tone shifting to one of quiet reverence, "has become more than just a military strategy. It has become a legend. The galaxy now tells stories of how Earth, without ever drawing a blade, brought an empire to its knees, of how we, who once cowered in the shadows of greater powers, now stand at the forefront of a new order." One of the delegates from a distant system raised his hand, his voice tentative. "But where do we go from here, General Rote? What happens now that Earth's influence is unquestioned?" Marnik turned toward the speaker, his face a study in calm resolve. "We don't seek domination. We don't seek subjugation. Earth's rise wasn't about conquest. It was about ensuring that no one, no empire, no race would ever forget what happens when they misjudge humanity's will. Earth will lead. Yes, but we will lead by example, not by force." As Marnik spoke, his mind drifted back to those early days of the Vesper Protocol, the quiet hours spent in the war rooms, the careful plotting, the steady hand that had guided Earth's strategy. It had been a long game, one that required more than just tactical brilliance. It had required patience, restraint, and an understanding of the long-term consequences of every action. The Vesper Protocol had never been about swift vengeance. It had been about showing the galaxy that Earth's strength lay not in military power, but in its ability to endure and outthink its adversaries. "Do you see it now?" Marnik asked the room, his voice unwavering. "The cost of underestimating humanity is not just the destruction of an empire. It's the loss of the future. The galaxy will never forget what happened to the Chal. They will not forget that Earth rose, not with weapons, but with intellect, with strategy, and now we control our destiny. Our future is in our hands. The lights flickered as a transmission came through the laser plasma displays. It was a communication from the Galactic Council, an acknowledgement of Earth's new position in the galaxy. A new order had emerged, one in which Earth was no longer the overlooked species, but a cornerstone of galactic politics. This is the beginning of something greater, Marnik whispered to himself, as the transmission confirmed the unity Earth had earned. It wasn't just a seat at the table anymore. It was the table itself, and Earth would set the terms. Behind him the room was still, the weight of the moment settling over everyone present. The Chal Empire's legacy was already becoming a cautionary tale, and Earth, with its newfound strength and quiet power, had become the myth, the legend. The delegation members knew this wasn't just a new political era, it was a new galaxy, one in which Earth had firmly cemented its place. As Marnik turned toward the vast expanse of space beyond the observation deck, he couldn't help but feel the quiet pull of history. Earth had already won, but the real work of leading, of guiding the galaxy into a new age of peace, justice, and shared strength, was only just beginning. The room began to empty, but Marnik remained, watching the stars that had once seemed so distant now feel within reach. The galaxy would never again underestimate Earth. The Vesper Protocol had ensured that. "Do you see it?" Marnik Rote's voice was low, almost a whisper, yet it echoed in the quiet command room, a stark contrast to the chaos that had once reigned. His eyes, unwavering, scanned the laser plasma display before him, where a galaxy that had once trembled under the weight of Chal's supremacy now lay in fragments. Chal Prime, once a glowing jewel of power, had long since vanished from the maps, and in its place, Earth's flag, resolute and unyielding, now stood as the galaxy's new symbol of authority.
"Yes, General."
"They see it," Ralazlar replied, his tone steady but filled with the solemnity of the moment. He was standing beside Marnik, looking out across the room, at the bustling military officials and diplomats who had gathered to witness the final chapter of an era. The room was filled with the weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts, the end of an empire, the beginning of something new. The galaxy, still shaken by the fall of Chal Prime, had settled into a strange quiet, but this quiet was not the peace of resolution. It was the quiet that followed an inevitable end, the calm after a storm that had long been brewing. The Chal Empire's fall had been swift and thorough, but its collapse was not merely the loss of a planet. It was the unraveling of a way of life that had ruled over countless systems for centuries. Now, with the Empire reduced to ruins, Earth's power stood undeniable, unchallenged, and inescapable. Marnik turned from the display, his eyes narrowing. "They've learned, haven't they? The rest of the galaxy, the other factions, they understand now what happens when you underestimate us. Earth doesn't need to strike with fire or blood. We've done more with patience than the Chal could ever accomplish with their might." Ral nodded, his eyes reflecting a deep, almost sorrowful understanding. Yes, Earth's method wasn't loud, wasn't violent, but it was deliberate, calculated. We let them burn themselves out, and we stayed in the shadows, waiting. We were always the ones they overlooked, the ones they thought were weak. Marnik's gaze softened slightly. They forgot what it means to be human. They forgot that while we don't rely on our strength alone, we are capable of it when pushed. But it's not just about power. It's about knowing when to act, and when to wait. And in the end, we didn't need to act violently. We used the tools at our disposal: intelligence, patience, strategy, and it was enough to bring them to their knees. As Marnik spoke, a message began to scroll across the display: acknowledgement from the Galactic Council, Earth's new standing confirmed. It was a formality, but it still held weight. With the fall of the Chal Empire, the galaxy had shifted its gaze, and Earth had become the focal point. The remnants of the Chal leadership were scattered, some in hiding, some pleading for mercy. But Earth had not pursued vengeance out of bitterness. It had simply ensured that the cost of underestimating humanity would be paid. "Do you think they understand now?" Marnik's voice was steady, but there was an underlying edge, as though he were speaking to the galaxy itself, to the Council, to the universe that had once looked down on Earth. Rao looked at him, his face unreadable. "They understand. The story of Chal's fall will echo for generations. Every leader, every empire, will remember what happened when they underestimated humanity. And what is that story? Marnik asked, his gaze moving to the flickering flag of Earth on the screen, the symbol of a new era. It's the story of a people who didn't have the strength of armies or weapons. Raoul replied, his voice almost reverential. It's the story of how a people who were once weak, once divided, stood up when they were pushed too far. How Earth, with all its flaws, became something more, something no one expected. The galaxy won't forget the day Earth took its place as the force to be reckoned with. Marnik's eyes lingered on the display, where Earth's flag waved proudly, unshaken by the chaos of the past. The Chal Empire thought their arrogance would save them, but in the end, it was their arrogance that destroyed them. They underestimated us, and in the process, they sealed their own fate. The room grew still, the hum of activity fading into the background. There was a quiet tension in the air, as the reality of the galaxy's new order settled into place. Earth had ascended, not through force, but through intelligence, restraint, and the quiet power of vengeance. The Chal were gone, but what of the other? What of the factions still out there, watching, waiting, wondering if Earth would be as merciful as it had been with the Chal? Where do we go from here? Raoul asked, his voice low. Marnik's eyes hardened, the weight of the future settling over him. We rebuild the galaxy, not with conquest, but with strength. We show them that Earth is not to be ignored, that we will stand at the center of this galaxy, and we will ensure peace, a peace earned, not taken. The realization hit him fully. The fall of Chal Prime had been only the first step. Earth was now the nucleus around which the galaxy would turn. They would not be ruled by others any longer, and as Earth's leaders continued to position themselves within the Council, the rest of the galaxy would have to reckon with their new place in the order. In the distance, beyond the view screens, the stars seemed to shimmer a little brighter, the space between them not so vast. The empire that had once reigned supreme was gone. The galaxy, now unsettled and uncertain, would have to find its balance again, but this time, Earth would be the one holding the scales. Marnik stood tall, his heart resolute. Let them come, he said, his voice firm, unwavering. Earth is ready. And as the final waves of communication flowed across the galaxy, as the message of Earth's dominance echoed in the farthest reaches of space, the galaxy would know one undeniable truth. Earth was no longer a weak, overlooked planet. It was the new force, the new power, and nothing, not time nor distance, could take that away.